Russia masses 50,000 troops around Sumy, putting Ukraine in precarious position. They described as the Ukrainian forces being outnumbered 3-1, and some really high casualty numbers also going along with that on a daily basis. Plus, the Russians continue to gain ground and take over more land. Not looking real good for the Ukrainians right now, is it?
It hasn't been looking good for the Ukrainians for years.
Oh,
Man, you can really go all the way back to the end of 2022, where they had probably what's going to be in history as their two signature successes in this whole, even at the tactical level, with the taking of the Kherson city and the Kharkiv region, when they forced Russia back over thousands of square kilometers. Since that time, it's been almost all downhill in the backward sense for the Ukraine side. It's beginning in the 2023 offensive, where they were crushed in their attempt to drive Russia out. And ever since that time, they have been on the defensive. And as you pointed out, evidence suggests that Russia's ramping up for a pretty solid summer offensive, really across the whole front line. You mentioned that in the Sumy area. Interesting thing about that claim of 50,000, it seems to be that they're prioritizing the Russians numbers of troops and not so much like mechanized forces and tanks and the armored personnel carriers, et cetera, which implies that they're going to ramp up their preferred strategy tactic, which is to cause Ukrainian casualties,
yeah.
not so much to take ground, because you're not going to take a lot of ground without a lot of mechanized forces and other things to allow you to get further down the field. But they do have enough to get up to the line and then continue to have casualties. So I doubt you'll see a big movement in terms of how much territory is taken here in the next coming months, but you will continue to see a very high casualty rate. And as we've talked before, it's a zero-sum deal, and the Ukraine side just doesn't have men to replace those they lose.
Well, and I was thinking that along the lines of, well, if they ask for more military hardware, then you have to have someone to operate it. And with a
Right.
declining number of people behind, triggers in the Ukrainian military force, which is the direction it's going, they're running out of people. Extra equipment and arms is not going to help them with their depleted forces, it doesn't seem. I don't know if they're clamoring for more from aid from the United States, what NATO's position is on this vis-a-vis giving them additional arms and weapons. But, back to my fundamental point.
Well, and that's been my frustration, especially in The Hague with the NATO meeting and, all these big meetings that you keep seeing all over the television, and Zelensky, again, when he's making these speeches and everybody's cheering loudly and all this kind of stuff. And they're talking about how NATO's going to go up to 5% to GDP in the next 10 years. And a lot of that's going to Ukraine. They're going to give them X, Y, and Z, et cetera. Zelensky's talking, I need air defense missiles. And I can certainly understand his desire to have that. But no one in all of this self-congratulatory parade talks about the fact that you just mentioned here about the personnel. If we give you all this stuff, who is going to operate it? Because there is a dearth of people at the front line. They still are having terrible situations where they are grabbing men off the streets in Ukraine. They're talking about lowering the age of mobilization down to 18. It's terrifying a lot of parents. And there's a lot of people leaving the country trying to get out, especially if they have 16, 17-year-old kids. They want to get them out before it gets to 18, et cetera. There's just no people to continue to operate this. So you're going down a path that's going to say, we'll lose a little bit slower if we get this stuff, but it's not going to change the outcome. You will lose.
Well, and they've got grandpas behind the trigger out there on the front lines too. We're talking, some seniors out there that have taken up arms and trying to defend their country, whether they want to or whether they were pulled out of a bar and were told to. That just is reflective of a very desperate situation. On the you mentioned the 5% that Trump was able to get the NATO forces to contribute to their own defense, which I'm glad to see happening. And we've been footing the bill to defend them now forever. But that's a gradual process. Just because they're there and they agree that, okay, 5% of GDP is going to go to, they have to build up their militaries. They don't have sizable military forces right now. They're going to have to acquire the weaponry and the machinery and the hardware, which is going to be a gradual acquisition. Just by them agreeing to do that doesn't benefit Ukraine at all.
Well, it doesn't. And in fact, when you peer a little bit more into the details of what's been claimed, despite all the happy headlines and the claims that we're going to go to this 5%, which is a staggering amount above what they've been doing for decades, by the way.
Yeah.
Then you look at the details and they're saying, yeah, we'll do another reassessment. about the year after Trump leaves office. So all this congratulations and claims that they're going to do this or that for NATO, and you saw Mark Rutte, the NATO Secretary General, just lathering up Trump one side and down the other, praising him in public and saying all these wonderful things. But call me cynical, but I think that a lot of these European leaders have no intention to ever meet 5%, but they just want to get Trump off the stage until where they can get a more amenable president, maybe that might not be as concerned as he is about, not doing more than our share and allowing them not to. So just call me skeptical. We'll see how it works out. But
Yeah.
you're talking 10 years, and they have all their own domestic economic issues. There's going to be a lot of elections between now and then. I'll just put me in the we'll see camp.
Yeah, I'm with you wholeheartedly on that. I'm jaded and cynical about most everything. So yeah, I'm going to wait, keep my popcorn out, wait to see what they actually do. And let's face it, they might have conceded to Trump's demands, at least on paper, just to sort of get them in the room with him when he sits down with them and talks about tariffs. It's like you don't want to be in a bad position vis-a-vis Trump.
100% agree.
If you have to negotiate with him. All right, let's pivot over to the situation in Iran and Israel. I personally have no idea how much damage was done to the Iranian nuclear facilities. I haven't been in there. I think people are still struggling over whether or not it's been damaged for months or years. I guess the significant takeaway for me is at least there's a ceasefire and they're not dropping bombs on each other and killing each other right now. Do you see that lasting? I mean, some of the statements from the Iranian officials that are still alive are a little bit troubling, most notably the fatwa that was issued on Trump and Netanyahu the other day. That's not a step in the right direction, but whatever. But how do you see this?
Yeah, frankly, you have those kind of statements coming from all three parties, the U.S., Israel, and Iran. So in my view, this is nothing but a pause because all three parties needed it. We needed it because, especially with what we're still trying to do with Ukraine, and what we had tried to do in the Red Sea, and then now with this, we didn't have enough air defense interceptor missiles or offensive missiles to maintain a steady state offensive that could have lasted many months, for example, between Iran and Israel. Israel obviously was running short on interceptor missiles. They'd been firing, for a long time here. Now they stepped up, and the Iranians showed that they had a significant capacity for missiles, despite what some may have believed. I think you and I have been talking on this show for a long time that Iran did have the capability to penetrate the Iron Dome system, and now they've proven it. And Israel doesn't have the capacity to endure that kind of sustained hit, and they've never suffered this in their entire history to the level they have here, and they can't sustain it. Iran also couldn't sustain what they were enduring because they basically had lost their air defense system. So the Israeli jets were flying with virtual impunity along with So the bottom line, everybody needed a pause, but nobody has changed their position. Nothing has been accomplished. So as far as I can see, we're just waiting for it to restart.
Okay, and I guess given the incredible Israeli intelligence, we got to give them props for sneaking in and setting everything up for this strike that they did. I mean, it seems to me it's changed the whole nature of warfare when you consider drone technology and how moving in and hiding things close to the targets is an achievable objective. But don't you think, given these rocket batteries, these missile batteries, I would argue they take up some large space that Iranian intelligence or Israeli intelligence would know where they are. So this open airspace that they were able to get and achieve, that it just seems to invite launches of more airstrikes to blow up the very missiles that they can't shoot down once they arrive in Israeli airspace.
Well, they certainly wanted to do that, but Iran for decades has been well aware that if they got into a fight with Israel, that this is how the fight would be done. So they put very few of their launchers out in the open to be seen or like in buildings where it can be easily identified and then the building blown up. So they've all been, the majority have been underground where they remain. So they have these situations where, like actually North Korea has done this for many decades, and that may be where they originated the idea, is that there is like, these hardened caves, and then the blast doors will open, the launcher will come out, it will fire its load, and then it'll go back in there. So unless you have a plane in the air just looking, or a drone of some sort that can have a target of opportunity in minutes, you can't get up there before the thing's back in its container. So it's very, very difficult to do that. And we don't even know how many missiles and launchers Iran actually has. I saw some people claiming that 40% of the launchers had been destroyed because that seems to be the key issue. You can have 1 million missiles, but if you don't have any launchers, it's meaningless. I don't think anyone really knows how many launchers they have to know what percentage has been damaged. So I would not expect that that's going to go away anytime soon.
And I imagine they're spread far and wide geographically too. So
Absolutely, they are. Yeah.
fair enough.